Hello, and here we are again at Autistic Radio. Thanks, as always, to our sponsors, coldpack.co.uk, for practitioners needing the best chiropractic, osteopathic, physiotherapy, gel pack. Using coldpack.co.uk enhances what we do here and makes Autistic Radio possible. And Harry, let's have something back from the studio without the noises here in the background in India. Let's do the 555.
Thanks, Jules. Hello, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 1st of February 2026. This is where we discuss the post shared on the autisticradio.com Facebook page. And the first post is from Dean Beadle Speaker, who speaks at conferences, events, and insets about autism. Also a singer, proud to be autistic, he, him. And he shared the following. Today, the episode I guested on of the Let's Talk Small Talk podcast had been released. I spoke to the ever wonderful Libby Hill about my experience of the intersection between being autistic and OCD. We talk about what the OCD thought cycle is, ponder why autistic are statistically more likely to develop OCD, and what helps to manage OCD. This was a very powerful and raw topic for me to discuss at length, but I'm glad it's available as a resource for anyone needing guidance in this tricky area of obsessive compulsive disorder. You can find the episode on Spotify and all the usual podcasty places. What's people's thoughts? The link between autism and OCD.
Interestingly, it's not something that I have any experience of. So the best thing for listeners to do is to find this podcast and listen. I think making a podcast about something that's dear to somebody, something that they know about, is where it's at. So let's encourage people to find that podcast.
What elements of autistic experience might be seen as possible OCD?
Well, from my experience, I'm aware of someone who has been diagnosed with OCD, and there's been links with autism because their children has been diagnosed autistic. And the OCD started through a crisis where it was something playing on the mind. It was a health issue. And it was playing on their mind because they felt that they couldn't resolve this issue. And they tried so many different ways of tackling it. They spent a lot of money as well to get treatment. And it turned out after a long process, like getting into the mental health system and speaking with someone about this particular thing and this experience, this journey, which took a bit of time, I would say maybe 18 months, was linked with autism. but that was because there was already a link with autism because of the person's children. And I think the link that I'm guessing here, from my perspective, is the overthinking part, the over-preparation part, and how that could link into something. It can become obsessive and compulsive, and it could take over your life. And as we know, everybody's different, so it's always hard to judge and say, where it is at in many people. Other people who are autistic may not be OCD. I'm not aware that I am, but I think that's what the link is. And it's certainly a good discussion point.
I think in general, out in the world, people don't really know what OCD is, so it would be a good podcast to listen to. But I can see how there could be a link. I just wouldn't be able to describe it because OCD is more complicated than it seems.
I just followed the web address that comes with the meme, and it immediately got forwarded to privatespeechtherapy.co.uk. So the podcast is a podcast of a speech therapist, and not one that looks as though they are autistic themselves. So people need to have a look into this, decide for themselves whether they want to follow that link or not.
The next post is from Autism Awareness. Which is a page, health and wellness website, health and beauty community centre, raising autism awareness, celebrating neurodiversity, and spreading understanding every day. And what they've shared is something it's called the 3 levels of autism. Level 1 needs support, trouble reading social cues, prefers routines, dislikes sudden changes, may feel overwhelmed in busy settings, and benefits from coaching and coping tools. Level 2 needs more support, noticeable social challenges, strong focused interests, struggles with transitions, and needs school work accommodations. Needs school and work accommodations. In level 3, needs daily support, little or no speech, strong repetitive behaviours, big stress when routines change, and needs one-on-one help and communication tools. What's people's thoughts on this diagram?
Where did this bullshit come from, Harry?
United States.
Well, I think there's a whole group of people out there listening to autistic radio that are going to feel quite upset by having themselves classified like this. There are reasons why people end up being classified, and those reasons can be good in research and in clinical settings. But this simplification of a whole spectrum of people with varying differences, their neurodivergence occurring in different ways in different times, and the overlaying patterns, it's disrespectful to have this kind of oversimplification out there. It looks very much as though it comes from the old-fashioned ABA school to me. I don't know that for certain, but I would ask people who are listening at Autistic Radio to be very skeptical about the qualifications of people who put this stuff out there.
What it does is it creates a conversation on autism being oversimplified to help others who feel they need help, like parents, carers of autistic children or autistic friends. And even saying that right now kind of grates with me because I don't like saying it that way. I don't like saying it that way. But I'm trying to understand why it's been put across that way. And I think a lot of the time it's sometimes to promote a service, it's to promote a certain ideology, and sometimes it's just trying to simplify life for the want of trying to find solutions and answers to they think may be a problem. And as we know, and as we've discussed many times, life isn't like that. And I agree with what you said, Jules. It's very, it's insulting. It's very negative from my perception when reading that out. But it's also very important to share that this is what's being shared and how damaging it could be for some people. It may help some people, possibly, but I can't see anything beyond it being more damaging.
I would worry too that it would limit resources to some people.
That's a fair point as well. It's about if you put something simple or something limiting, it will limit resources out there. It'll try like it's obviously like behaviorism and all that. It's got these so-called solutions to that autism, which we all know has been damaging for people. So yeah, I totally agree with what you said there.
Let's just go to our text, and it's a little bit on fire. Straight into somebody saying it oversimplifies needs. Somebody saying, I think levels is an unhelpful concept. Somebody saying this shouldn't be confused with the situation in Canada. Somebody saying autism is not linear, it is a spectrum. Somebody saying it's similar to low functioning and high functioning labels. These texts are just coming in so quickly. It's better to speak to someone who knows the autistic person and another person who says it's all about compliance. I've looked at the group, and there are people who are complaining and saying that they do not recognize and do not recommend this group. Now, I also know, as I look down, despite the puzzle piece being used and those tropes, that it's a Facebook group and there are useful things in there. So it's just unfortunate that the group isn't along the lines of more modern thinking from the neurodiversity paradigm, it's still stuck in a place that we find unhelpful as autistic adults, I would say.
The next post is from the Actually Autistic Coach, who's a personal coach. I empower my fellow autistic people by working to uncover and unmask, revealing our best selves. And he shared the following: independence is treated as the gold standard of autistic adulthood. But independence is mostly a myth. Everyone who is independent is supported by someone, something, or a structure that makes it possible. Money, health, family, technology, invisible labour. Autistic humans are shamed for needing support in ways that are simply more visible. Needing help doesn't make us less capable. It means our needs aren't being outsourced or hidden. Disability isn't a personal deficit, it's a relational truth. We don't become more worthy by needing less. Rather, we become safer by being honest about what we need. A life that requires constant self-erasure to maintain independence isn't a free life. It's a fragile one, and, unfortunately, the one that society is trying to force us into. What's people's thoughts?
I like this post. It's strange how to be independent, you actually have to be in relationship. It's the paradox of it, isn't it? And the reverse is true, and I think that's what this person is insisting upon, is that all ideas we may have about being independent, being sort of singular and apart perhaps, totally depend on being part of a greater relationship. So it's like almost like bridging the divide between those two concepts, I think, was what's going on here, and what he terms a relational truth. Because the last post was about support, and I immediately thought to myself, no, it's not support, it's relation that is required. People need to have fulsome relationship with the world, and that's possibly where a lot of the problems originate.
Yeah, totally agree. The thing about some so-called support, and it's been said many times before, is support is generally, in some people's eyes, control. It's management, strong management, control basically, controlling you, rather having a relationship, a deep connection which works both ways. And that's a good, true point. I mean, in my own experience, I like to think, well, I'm quite independent. You know, this kind of pride thing is that I don't need help with this. Not that I'm saying that I'm better than others that do. It's just like it gives me kind of sense of pride that I can do certain things I feel more independently than I can with others. But for the independence to work, there's got to be a structure in place. There's got to be things in place. There's got to be support if you require it, which in my life there is. Because I'm generally independent in a way, but there is some situations that comes up that I do ask for help. Things like making a phone call, things like going in somewhere kind of official, just to make sure that things are done correctly and I don't get caught out, not being conned, but just I don't get caught out by feeling overwhelmed. But the other point is not to feel bad about it if you do need support. There's this thing about self-sufficiency that they try to promote, this kind of perfect person, doesn't need help, can do everything on their own. It just it's nonsense. You always need some kind of support, or it certainly need a structure. It can't all be down just to one person, and people shouldn't feel bad for needing support. And I think that's what's wrong with society in general. It's like there's this thing about if you need more support than someone else, it's like you're inferior. And just to feel even that slightly less than someone else because of that sort of approach in life, it can be really damaging, to your health. It can be damaging to your self-esteem. And the overthinking thing comes in again. Even to think about your own life worth.
Yeah, we need to think of independence in the round here, don't we? Pushing people towards a concept of independence, self-sufficiency, resilience can have its place, but everything here is true because human beings are never independent. Human beings work cooperatively, they work in groups, they specialize. However independent somebody thinks they are completely supported, invisibly usually, by people around them, autistic or non-autistic. And yes, this shaming that happens when people are told they're not independent enough is another trope. It's another anti-disabled group blaming. Now, let's just realize it for ourselves. Let's not accept it for ourselves. Let's not internalize it. Let's be independent of thought. Let's stand up against these negative ideas and call that independence instead.
Thanks, Jules. I think independent enough is a great way of putting it, because there's these value systems that are being proposed that we comply with and conform to are quite alien. They are not relational. They are just demanding. So independent enough is judged by those values. And if we resist that, we are not necessarily in the wrong.
I was also thinking that somehow it's related to ableism But my main point right now is going to be this. Even if in any group people are dependent on you, like, I mean, let's just take a baby. A baby is dependent on adults. In the smallest group that I can think of in my life, like a nuclear family with a parent and children, at some point it starts to switch over in certain circumstances where even a young child is helping the parent in some way, especially in a family of neurodivergent people. Honestly, even a 5-year-old can hold your hand in a certain way or just ask a certain question that makes you realize they're supporting you.
How beautiful that is, Teresa. The small child is supporting the parent as much as the other way around in some circumstances. We are interconnected, and denying that interconnection is a way of classifying some groups as people as other or less. We can't internalize that and allow that to happen. We have to stand together in groups, support each other against those ideas.
And with autism, it's in many ways invisible or just hard to relate to. But I'll give an example of that parent child thing. From an incredibly young age, a child can be helpful to a more obvious situation, such as if they have a deaf parent, but they're a hearing child. It can be as young as preschool, but they can support the parent. In a small way, like just by hearing something.
I was picking up on the emotional reality of what you were saying too, Teresa. You know, being with others is an emotional balance as well.
There's something else I've come across in autism world, and it's the professional wanting dependency, because what they need themselves relies on us being dependent on them. That gives them their meaning. It gives them their ego. It gives them a value system. And so often they are pushing this idea of independence whilst denying the tools for independence. That's where we need to look at this. We need to see this push to independence as a complete hypocrisy in many cases.
I think the phrase that the poster used was outsourcing, and it's often done against our will. We're not voluntarily outsourcing our meaning and reality and feelings and whatever else that make us us. They're almost being taken from us. All round a good post, I think.
I think that word independence, it's just opened up such a wide range of issues. And as Jules says, it kind of highlights hypocrisy. Because there's these support mechanisms, or so-called support mechanisms, from people in work, in a career, making a living, making money, that need you to be there for them to have that position. So how independent would they want you to be? Because if you're too independent, it would do them out of a job, it would do them out of a career. And it's just it's that control thing again. Yeah.
It's almost like that Orwellian doublespeak, you know. Independence doesn't really mean independence in their mouths.
Could somebody other than me and Harry read out the text so that they are included?
I'm trying to think of where we can start these posts from in the text box. Let's go back to Robbie saying the measure of success by government is being in work and making money for them. There was a response that said those situations are not designed or structured to make us feel connected. There was agreement with what Jules said about taking independence and other subjects in the round. It was also said that push to independence is in a way a failure of society. And when we were discussing, familial relationships like mother-child bonding, that it was stated that there are hidden forms of communication and relation. When Jules brought up the idea of industries to a certain extent depending on people's buying into the interpretation of independence, someone said it's like a dealer mentality, a scarcity mindset even, which is, an oft-used socio-economic term. Teresa said a paycheck. And then Robbie comes back with the so-called support he was offered was taking away his independence. Teresa then says, just independent enough for their job to be easy. So I think that's a balancing act of the professionals.
Let's look at what we did at Autistic Radio. We offered the professionals a way to discuss autism directly with autistic people. A fully independent organisation. They said they wanted this. However, when we produce it and we're not dependent on them, they don't use it. It pulls a lie. They say they want to see independent autistic groups, but the main charities are unwilling to communicate with them in equitable communication. This idea that the general profession wants to create independence is a lie.
Yeah, it's like the classic dysfunction in the social relationship.
Yes, it's I mean, there's a lot of things going through my mind here, just all the stuff that we're talking about. It actually feels, Autistic Radio, Autistic Association, charity behind Autistic Radio, the way we've done things is very fair, but very independent to the big charities, but also very inclusive to have a way forward, to work a way forward. And these charities and organisations have said, yes, this is great, this is brilliant, we want to be involved. But as soon as they feel as their power, which seemingly over you, is endangered, is contested, even though it's not, it's just the natural way of the way we go things. It's like this defence mechanism comes in and say, wait a minute, you can be independent, but only on our terms. So that isn't really independent. It's a strange one. And it shows the hypocrisy and, as Jules has rightly said, the lie that people say, that they've said, the charities and some organisations have said, we want you to be independent, but if you come out with an independent view or a different point of view from what they think is the right one, you're looked upon as a troublemaker or an upstart. And that must happen to a lot of autistic people who begin to ask questions. Just simple questions of why certain things aren't done a certain way, why support packages are done one way and not the other, why a certain person is doing this rather than another one. Just genuine personal questions that anybody with a self of independence within them would do. But if you do that, they don't want to hear it because they know best.
Robbie's put in text that the so-called support he was offered was taken away his independence. I think I've said that. Yeah. So he's come back with, when social care investigated his complaint, they did not investigate his concerns. They investigated their tick box process. So I think I've caught that right, Robbie, yeah?
Yes, that's exactly it.
The next post is from Pete Warmby, autistic author. Autistic and ADHD, award-winning writer and speaker on autism and autistic lived experience. And shared the following. Autistic burnout happens and can be disastrous. Too much masking, for too long, and not enough rest for too much masking for too long, and not enough rest or time with interests can lead to a complete collapse. Kindness is a lifesaver. What's your thoughts?
I've noticed that this poster quite often posts about burnout, and I empathise with them. That this may be something that they have to deal with on a consistent basis. So it seems they're aware of the balance that is required and the kindness that is required to what's the word I'm looking for? It's not endure, to cope with these situations. The rest in time with interest and having enough of it and not going too far and too long with masking. But of course, there are pressures of life that probably take over us and make these things inevitable to a certain extent.
I think the word burnout is used in the general population to mean something entirely different to what it means for autistic people. The way I've come to learn and understand it from those who've experienced it is that a period of burnout can push people beyond the limit. And once they've reached that stage, it's not okay to constantly be trying to dig oneself out of it, to get back on the horse, to try it again. It's necessary to take steps back and allow oneself a reflection and a healing time that's extensive enough, because the repetitive yo-yos of trying again makes things worse. So I would encourage people who really feel that they are experiencing that depth of burnout that comes to autistic people to not look at it through social media, but to find some more expert help. Maybe it's time to pick up books rather than quick fixes on TikToks and those other kinds of things, because the word burnout has meanings in conventional society that has nothing to do with autistic burnout. But the other thing I'd like to think of is that people can come back from that depth of burnout, and people can also recognize that things are going too far from them and step back from the brink. Prevention, prevention, prevention.
I'd like to chime in on this. So, I think that in my adult life, especially in a certain part of my career and family situation, I was so highly masked with no idea that I was autistic. That during COVID, these are not linearly connected necessarily, but it was during COVID that it was more obvious that I was autistic. Being diagnosed was, and I think for other people too, if they're highly masking and then come to realize what's going on, it can be a large burnout. But then I also recognize other times in my life where I had major burnouts. They were called something else, like a major depression or something. I'm still not, sometimes I don't like the ways people describe it. And I apologize if anybody does describe it this way about the spoons and things like that. Because to me, burnout would be a much larger thing. It's just what I want to say is it's true when you say that other people use the word burnout. I don't think it's nearly as significant as this sort of autistic burnout. And I'm sure there are other kinds of burnouts, that are very serious too.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on your experience there, Teresa. As somebody outside this world, that was kind of what I was trying to get at, as what I understood as from people like yourself who've actually experienced these things. And I do agree with you that these social battery, having enough spoons, these aren't really related to that depth of burnout that you're describing. There's something else. They're related, but there's something else. And once somebody gets into that situation, I really do believe that there is a need to recognize that it's a different place. And labels that are put on it are breakdown. Labels that are put on it are depression. Labels that are put on it are manic episodes. And yes, we do have to differentiate true autistic burnout from colloquial terms.
Also, it's at those points where you can lose significant relationships and um, maybe like a drop out of school or fail in a career or something like that.
I've experienced burnout for what I believe is burnout, and it generated a panic attack and then total exhaustion. And I used to think it was because I was doing too much, as in doing the activity too much. But then thinking back, what it was is I was dealing with other people too much. And I don't mean always directly, but sometimes just being around people, being around noise, around smells, sights, sounds, all sorts of things. And too much of it caused what I believe was burnout. And the reason that I call it burnout is because I couldn't leave the house for a few days. I mean, I couldn't even go out to the bin, which is basically seems a simple task. That's where you know it's serious. But the thing that we're kind of speaking about is a language thing, is about the word burnout and the word masking and unmasking is so used in so many different ways in general within autistic people, within different autistic people, with how they feel, what the words actually mean. It's just, it's hard to pinpoint. What it does do is at least it creates conversation. And it creates conversation on different people's experience of what they feel that word or term means.
In the text, somebody is asking, is it autistic burnout, and is autism causing it? And I would like to reframe that. I would like to say that is taking responsibility for the situation an autistic person might be in. Whereas reframing it to say that it's the social construct that puts a person into a situation that becomes impossible, either because they are having to use all their energy to mask and lose their selves and lose their identity through pretense, or a situation where they never get respite from being their sensitivity, their sensitive self, there's our sensitivity to society and everything that we are forced upon. It's those things, it's the externals. Now, it's quite possible that being autistic makes us more sensitive and makes us more likely to be overwhelmed. But we shouldn't take that on as a failure in ourselves, because I'm an autistic person. I haven't experienced burnout because I've never been put under those stresses. It's not intrinsically autistic. It's what we have to deal with, surely.
I think for me, I'd like to take a step back from the masking. I almost want to say like a lifetime of masking. So if you're a certain age, and whether or not you were known to be autistic or knew you were autistic, or just people thought you were different, and then especially the age that a lot of us here are, so 61 years old, at the time you got to school, they would have noticed something's different, or your parents might have thought you're not coping unless you undergo a lot of sort of behavior modification, like to an extreme. I guess then you're just, I just call it masking, but whatever it is, it's pretty exhausting. And I would, in answer to a question from the text, say, yeah, I'm describing a thing called autistic burnout, not some other kind.
Again, it's a good post because it's reminded me that sometimes I'll interpret a post as being personal to the person who posts it. I immediately interpret this as Pete Warmby expressing his own life. But very often these posts can be, helpful expressions for others, general statements from one's personal understanding to share with others.
This also goes back to that independence or dependence thing. The older my children got, the more I learned from them about, I think I've said this before. My daughter used to physically show me, she would say, "This is chilling." And then she would put her legs up against the wall. So she was like the letter L. And she would say, "You need to try this." And then the other day I found something really good and kind of official about doing that, and some other things that are very good for you, shaking it out.
Yeah, I remember my friend dancing around a supermarket. He was ejected by security, but he was not going to have people tell him he couldn't dance around a supermarket.
I was dancing on an Indian train just this morning, and you know what? Other people joined me, and we smiled, and we had connection. We didn't have the same languages, but it's human. It's infectious. Give it a little wiggle. It's okay.
Jules, did you feel comfortable enough to dance, or was it just something you did? Because sometimes when you feel very comfortable, you just do things. And that's why it's reciprocated and the vibe is good and shared by others.
You're a wise man, Ray. You're absolutely right. I do feel comfortable. I have no shame. I also, in that morning, tore a strip off a guy who acted arrogantly to me when he checked me into a posh hotel. And I had no shame or worry about making sure that person knew I had an opinion. I worried a little it might have been embarrassing a little for my wife. And she said, "No, you're just trying to teach the world." And she was okay with it. I hope other autistic people will get into a situation where they don't feel as though the rest of society will immediately condemn them, because my experience is that they don't. I don't get condemned for giving a strong opinion about what I think to the man in the position of power. And I get a wonderful reaction when I do a little dance and a little wiggle and play as an adult. What you fear rarely happens. It's the fear that restricts people, all people. And not having that fear, I think, is one of my fortunate situations in most situations. It's not having the fear.
It's a saving grace, Jules.
I love that. I can't tell you what I use the term saving grace for, but I use it a lot. Um, I make up words for situations. And when you were sharing that situation about checking into the hotel, Jules, sometimes happens at banks and places. So I created this portmanteau, superficious. It's superficial and officious together.
I'm going to use that and take it away. Thank you.
As soon as every journalist I know, I teach it to them, because as soon as somebody writes it in an article, I'm entering it into the Oxford Dictionary.
I just like the example that's being talked about there, or the subject, the topic, is basically how confident you feel around other people. A decision of how to behave around other people. Things like positively, dancing, singing. And even though it's not something I would do, it's nice to hear, and there's plenty of examples of it, of, being on a train, being somewhere public, and someone does something, it's a bit different, maybe even odd to some people's eyes. Something musical, someone even just talking, somebody doing something a bit different. The human connection, a lot of times, is people join in happily. I know there's probably a lot of stuff on Facebook and stuff that's probably staged, but there's one or two things I'd imagine aren't staged, and it's just showing that human connection. People I'm sure I've seen something where somebody was playing the bagpipes on a train or something. The last train coming from Glasgow, people were drunk and that right enough, but it kind of showed the people kind of joined in. It was that kind of human connection. And that sort of kind of demonstrate, just let yourself out a bit. Because I certainly feel in my personality that I hold a lot of myself back. You know, just, I can remember being dead happy and then someone saying, please calm down, you're a bit loud. And that stayed with me, even though it wasn't done with bad intentions. It was just like, you're a bit loud. And it's like, I was just expressing my happiness. And considering what I'm talking about, it was actually my surprise 40th birthday celebration that I was totally obviously surprised, not expecting it. So I was really happy. And because I sort of high pitched a little, it was like, and then it's like, oh, no. It's like to be free and to be accepted and people joining in. It does sound very, it's, very inspiring.
Bloody hecklers, eh?
Well, thanks all. That's us coming to the end. Thanks everyone for the conversation tonight. A really good conversation. And thanks for everyone who shared the posts that we've talked about in the topics for today as well. So this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 1st of February 2026, which is part of the Spectrum Voices conversation, which is live every Sunday, 5:55 p.m. to 7 p.m. UK time. And I look forward to doing the same next week. So thank you once again, and good night.